Hey everybody, Dr. Diane here. In this video, we're talking about overcoming the sex dry spell. And this is really important because we actually see there's studies that are actually showing that sex and sexual activity is a predictor of whether or not couples will stay together. It also can determine a level of happiness in partnerships. And of course, none of this is true all the time, right? There's just research correlating these things, and we want to consider that. And if you're an exception to the rule, then there's always exceptions to the rule. So this is not an always never type of statement, right? We do want to consider that. But what we see is that what happens when couples are sexually connected is that there's this feeling of connection, right? There's this feeling of connection, there's this bond. And that's what we see in research is there's this bond that really drives couples together. And that changes the way they interrelate. It changes their hormones. That changes their stress. It changes them feeling like they're part of the same team and they're working together on things. So having that type of sexual connection is really important in the bonding mechanism for hormones. And women, we have different bonding chemicals largely than men. I shouldn't say largely, but women secrete more oxytocin to bond. Men tend to secrete more something called vasopressin to bond. But regardless, we do secrete some of both of these. But regardless of that, it's this bond, this chemical change that really truly happens in the brain when we come together sexually that's been shown and related to the help to promote long-term relationships. So why does the dry spell happen and how do we get out of it? Dry spell can happen sometimes because of long distance relationships, so that's a fairly straightforward one. But sometimes it just happens because of busyness, because of stress, because of overwhelm, and really because of not prioritizing this as much as other things. Because in the beginning of a relationship, we don't have to prioritize sex, right? Usually there's just so many hormones that are driving that it happens. And then once those hormones of that newness wear off, if we're not prioritizing it, then it's very easy for this to just fall by the wayside, especially because there's not that many people talking about this. And without some understanding of how the chemistry works and why it's important to continue to prioritize this when those hormones wear off, it just sort of happens oftentimes without people realizing it until months have gone by and sometimes years have gone by and people report feeling very unhappy and disconnected. We also see research that's showing a lack of sexual intimacy with a partner can create a sense of loneliness or of anxiety, right? So there's almost that isolation, which is a huge risk factor for a lot of different diseases. So what's the answer? So if you've gotten into a dry spell, the first thing is not to bring more stress the fact that it's a dry spell, right? It is what it is. And we don't want to add another fuel to the flame for feeling bad about it. We want to practice self-compassion and understanding and then work to get it back. So in another video, you can see videos on my channel about other topics such as sex date nights, right? So you want to listen to some of the other things on this video because it will help give you ideas on how to get your spark back. But one of the initial things I would say is that if you have been in a dry spell, bringing that intimacy back can feel really hard because it can be uncomfortable. It's almost like not going to the gym for a while, and then the next time you go, it might feel hard. You might be extra sore. It might, like if you're running or you're lifting, it might hurt a lot. And then after you do it for a little while, you're back in the groove and it feels good and no longer feels awkward and painful. So if you haven't connected with a partner in a long time from a standpoint of sexually, then what can happen is it can almost feel super awkward. You're like trying to learn each other's bodies. You might be clunky together, right? It might not feel like it did in the beginning. So there's an element where it really is a level of just ripping the Band-Aid off and going for it and realizing that after a dry spell, it's normal for it to feel awkward. If it doesn't, great, but for a lot of couples, it does. And that's not meaning that there's anything wrong with it. It's not meaning you guys can't get all the passion and desire that you've had, back, that you had before, that you can get it back. You can get it back. All of that's true. It just might take a little massaging and a little bit of uncomfortableness in the beginning to start to bring back that comfort again. Because after, say months and years sometimes of a dry spell, this person has largely turned into your friend, right? And so it's almost like that awkwardness where, say you had a long-term friend and you're hooking up for the first time. Sometimes there's awkwardness with that, right? And so that is actually a very, very normal part. So that's the first step with this, is just rip off the Band-Aid, realize there's normalcy to that, and then check out the other videos on my channel. Please do subscribe, because we go through a lot of different ideas on ways to keep things novel and what to do in sex-starved relationships and how to foreplay with somebody you haven't had foreplay with and flirt with somebody you haven't flirted with in a long time, right? So we can talk about, you can check all that out on other videos of this channel. So I hope you will subscribe. I hope this has been helpful. You can find more information about how to work with me and my online programs to support your libido, your relationships, and more down in the show notes. I'm Dr. Diane, your libido doc. See you in another video.